I didn't expect the night to rearrange itself around one sentence. Not the music, not the drinks, not the half-fake laughter echoing off concrete walls. Just her leaning in, close enough that her shoulder brushed my arm, and saying, quietly, "Don't pretend you didn't notice me." The party was in the back of the auto repair shop where I worked. End of the week, one of the guys turning 40, someone dragged in a speaker that hissed between songs. The big garage doors were rolled halfway down, trapping the heat and the smell of oil. Everyone was louder than they needed to be. I was already thinking about leaving when she showed up, like she'd stepped in from a different temperature. She didn't dress like she was trying. That was the first thing. Black slacks, a loose cream blouse with sleeves rolled just enough to look intentional. Hair pulled back, then not, strands escaping and catching the light. Mid-40s, maybe older. Confident in the way that doesn't scan the room for approval. She stood near the drinks table, reading the labels like she had time. Someone said her name, Laura, and introduced her as a friend of the owner's sister. That was it. No resume. No explanation for why she belonged anywhere. I offered her a cup because my hands needed something to do. She smiled like she'd been watching me hesitate before I walked over. "Thanks," she said, and took it from me carefully, our fingers brushing. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. We didn't start with anything important. She asked how long I'd worked there. I told her. She nodded like she was filing it away. When I asked what she did, she shrugged. A little of this. Too much of that. I laughed too quickly. She noticed. Of course she did. There were gaps in the conversation that didn't rush to fill themselves. She didn't rescue me from them. She let them sit there, warm and humming. When someone bumped into her from behind, she steadied herself by placing her hand on my forearm. Not grabbing, just resting, like it belonged there. "You okay?" I asked. "I am," she said. Then, after a beat, "Are you?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what she meant, and I didn't want to guess wrong. At some point, the music got louder. Someone killed the lights except for the strip bulbs over the workbenches, turning everything soft and dim. Laura leaned back against the metal counter beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat through my shirt. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them, like she couldn't decide what felt natural. "You get quiet when you're thinking," she said. "I do. Your jaw tightens. Right there." She pointed, then stopped herself, her finger hovering between us before dropping back to her side. My throat went dry. No one had ever watched me closely enough to notice something like that without asking. That's when she leaned in. Not all the way, just enough. "Don't pretend you didn't notice me," she said, not teasing, not accusing. Just stating something true and letting it sit between us. I didn't say anything. I was afraid whatever came out would be too much or not enough. She pushed herself upright again, picked up her drink, and the moment passed like it had manners. Later, when she left, she touched my shoulder in passing, light, deliberate, and said, "It was nice talking to you." I nodded like a normal person. I even smiled. But days later, I still catch myself replaying the exact weight of her leaning against me, wondering if that was the moment something started or the moment I missed it. I didn't expect her to show up at the shop the next week, carrying a box of what looked like old tools she needed to fix something at home. She stepped past the grease-scented air like she belonged, though the fluorescent lights made everything harsh, and the smell of motor oil clung to the air. "Need a hand?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. My hands were already stained from wiping down a transmission. She hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. "If you don't mind. I'm hopeless with this kind of thing." I watched her shoulders tighten slightly as she set the box down. There was a kind of careful precision to her movements, like she was protecting herself from being too visible. But her hands, God, her hands, slightly calloused, with pale knuckles, fingers moving with quiet efficiency. They lingered over the edges of the tools before she touched them, a hesitation I noticed immediately. We worked side by side, and I kept my eyes on her, noticing the small things no one else would. The way she swallowed when she realized she'd misjudged the weight of a wrench. The faint crease at the corner of her eye when she smiled at something mildly funny. The way she leaned just slightly forward when she concentrated, tilting her head in a motion that made me want to memorize the shape of her neck. She didn't say much, and that silence felt heavy but not awkward. I tried talking, asking about her work, what brought her here, anything, but she answered in small, measured phrases, like giving too much away was dangerous. Still, there were moments when she'd glance up at me, and I caught something there. Maybe curiosity, maybe caution, maybe both. At one point, she winced and rubbed her temple. "I'm sorry," she murmured, almost to herself. "I didn't sleep much last night." Things piled up. Her voice dropped, soft and fragile, and I felt a pull in my chest. "Want to take a break?" I asked, gesturing toward the little counter where we kept soda and leftover coffee. She shook her head, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "No, it's fine. Let's just—" Her words trailed off. The vulnerability flickered like a candle, brief and delicate. I wanted to reach out, but she had this way of holding herself just out of reach, just enough that any step forward felt like walking on a tightrope. We went back to the tools, and I noticed the way she exhaled sharply whenever a piece slipped from her grasp, the way her fingers lingered on mine when passing a bolt, just for a moment too long to be accidental. I told myself I was imagining it, but the pull between us felt like static electricity in the air, small sparks that made it impossible to look away. She laughed softly when a stubborn bolt refused to budge, that low, careful laugh that didn't reach her eyes at first, but when it did, it lit her face. I found myself smiling even as I tried to focus on tightening the bolt. Then, as we stood close, reaching for the same tool, our hands brushed. Not a casual touch, not clumsy, deliberate enough that we both froze for a heartbeat, and I caught her inhale. She looked at me, eyes flickering, then looked away. But the moment stayed. It lingered longer than it should have, like a word left unspoken, like electricity that refuses to dissipate. And I realized, quietly, that I was already counting the hours until she'd be back. The rain started just as she arrived, tapping on the glass door like she couldn't quite decide if she wanted to come in. The garage lights reflected off the wet asphalt outside, making everything shimmer in that strange half-light that feels like it's holding its breath. I was cleaning up from the day, my shirt damp from wiping down a greasy engine part, when she stepped inside. "You got drenched," I said, handing her a towel without thinking. She shook her head, hair plastered to her forehead, and smiled. Small, private, the kind of smile that made you feel like she was letting you in on a secret you hadn't even asked for. "I like rain," she said, and for a second, I believed her. We moved around each other, organizing tools and cleaning benches, the kind of quiet work that allows proximity without the need for words. She reached for a socket at the same time I did, our fingers brushing. Neither of us pulled back, both lingering for just a moment too long, an electric hesitation in the air. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in my throat. How do you tell someone you've been thinking about them, about this, about the brush of fingers and the weight behind a look, when you barely know if it's allowed? She paused, wiping her hands on a rag, and for the first time, I saw something behind her guarded composure. A flicker of exhaustion, maybe loneliness. I wanted to reach out, to steady her, to ask if she needed to talk, but the thought of overstepping held me back. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, her face tightening just a fraction. I caught the name, someone familiar, someone from her past, maybe a thread she wasn't ready to untangle. She silenced it and looked away, carefully folding her hands in front of her. A private weight, sudden and visible, and I felt like an intruder in her interior life. We continued working, closer now, the storm outside drumming against the metal roof. Her elbow brushed mine, a casual contact, but it made my chest tighten. I wanted to lean in, to let something unspoken slip between us, but I froze, caught between wanting and restraint. She caught me staring and didn't comment, just shifted slightly, moving nearer in a way that seemed accidental, but I could feel her warmth, the subtle scent of her perfume mixing with the smell of grease. My hand itched to reach out, to touch her shoulder, maybe tuck a strand of wet hair behind her ear, but I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I smiled awkwardly, my fingers tightening on the wrench I was holding. She smiled back, faintly, knowingly, but the air between us had changed. Something was there now, fragile and dangerous, like we were both aware of a line neither of us was supposed to cross. And then, just as I was thinking maybe the moment could stretch into something more, her ex's name flickered on the phone again. She glanced at it quickly, exhaled softly, and turned away, breaking the spell. I stayed frozen, heart racing, thinking about how close we had been, how near that brush of skin and shared silence had brought us to something unnameable. I wanted to reach out, but she moved to the other side of the bench, leaving me with a hand that wanted to linger, a space that suddenly felt impossibly empty. We were the last ones in the shop, fluorescent lights flickering above us. The smell of oil had faded, leaving a faint metallic tang in the air, and outside, the sky had darkened to the kind of gray that feels like it's holding a secret. I was stacking tools quietly, pretending not to notice the way she leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with that inscrutable expression she had perfected. "I don't know why I keep coming back here," she said suddenly, voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the ventilation. I froze, wrenched halfway into the toolbox. "What do you mean?" I asked, careful, because I had a feeling this wasn't about engines or grease or any of the ordinary things we shared. She shrugged, letting her gaze drift past me to the wall, to the shelves lined with parts. "I mean, I don't know why I keep showing up, talking to you, standing here like this. Like I'm waiting for something that isn't supposed to happen." I swallowed, trying to make my voice sound normal. "You're not supposed to?" Her laugh was soft, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, not supposed to, not for me, not for us. I don't even know what us is. And I don't want to ruin whatever it is that's not yet anything." I wanted to reach out. I wanted to close the distance, to touch her hand, maybe let the tension unravel between us in one careless gesture. But something stopped me, the weight of knowing that the moment wasn't mine to claim. We stood there in silence, the kind that thrums with unspoken words. I noticed her hands, resting on the counter, fingers curling slightly, fingertips brushing the metal. The faint tremor in them made my chest tighten, like my heart was trying to speak for both of us. "What are we doing?" she whispered finally, turning toward me, eyes searching. "I can't tell if this is real or just me imagining it because I'm tired of pretending nothing exists here." Her question hung in the air like smoke, filling every corner of the shop. I wanted to answer, wanted to say something definitive, but no words seemed enough. I could only meet her gaze, letting the silence stretch between us, letting her feel that I was as tangled as she was, maybe more. She stepped closer, just a fraction, enough that I could feel her warmth radiating through the thin cotton of her blouse. My hands itched to reach out, to do anything that might anchor her in that moment, but I stayed frozen, caught between desire and fear. The quiet dragged on, and she closed her eyes briefly, exhaling like she was releasing something she shouldn't have to bear. When she opened them again, her vulnerability was raw, almost unbearable. "I'm tired of pretending I'm not waiting for something I shouldn't want," she admitted, voice breaking slightly. Her lips trembled, just a little, like she wanted to speak more, but couldn't. And then she said it, the line I couldn't stop hearing, even as she turned and walked toward the door, leaving the tools, the lights, and me behind. "Maybe I'm too old for this, but I don't know how to stop feeling it anyway." Her words lingered, heavier than anything I'd ever heard, and I realized that nothing in the shop, or in my life, would ever feel normal again. She showed up at the shop that evening holding a small envelope, folded neatly, like it weighed more than paper ever could. Her expression was closed, almost neutral, but there was a tension around her mouth that pulled at something deep in me. "Found this in a drawer," she said, voice quiet. "Thought maybe you should see it." I frowned, taking it from her. The handwriting was unfamiliar, delicate, slightly slanted, and the paper smelled faintly of old perfume. I didn't open it immediately, instead watching her, how her hands gripped the counter, how her jaw clenched and unclenched as if she were having an internal battle she wasn't ready to name. "Do you want me to read it?" I asked cautiously. She shook her head. "No, I mean not really. She hesitated, biting the inside of her cheek, like she was holding back a confession. "It's from someone I lost. A long time ago. Someone I never stopped thinking about. Her words landed like a quiet tremor. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent, letting the moment settle between us, heavy and fragile. The shop seemed smaller, the air warmer and thicker, as if it were holding its breath along with me. She traced a finger along the edge of the counter, slow, deliberate, not looking at me. "It's stupid," she murmured, almost to herself. Even after all this time, I wonder if things would have been different. I wanted to tell her something, anything, that could untangle the weight in her chest. I wanted to reach out, to steady her with words she couldn't speak herself. Instead, I said nothing, and she let the silence carry her confession further than she could with speech. Then, almost accidentally, I noticed a photo pinned behind her counter, a black and white shot of a younger version of her laughing with someone I didn't recognize at first. And suddenly, the pieces clicked together. The way she sometimes paused mid-sentence, the faint ache behind her eyes, the quiet reserve that wasn't always caution, but memory. "I had someone once," she whispered finally, voice trembling like the last thread holding her composure. "Someone I loved, maybe more than I should have. And then, I lost them. Not just to life, but to myself, too. I never fully let it go." I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to reach across the counter, to touch her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone, but instead I just nodded. I could see her vulnerability clearly now, raw and unguarded, and it made me ache in ways I hadn't expected. She sighed, leaning back against the counter, eyes distant yet searching. "I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because you notice things. Maybe because I don't know how to stop noticing you." Her words landed softly, but they shook something loose inside me. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her, and in the stillness, the quiet click of understanding between us was seismic. And then she reached out, just a fingertip brushing mine, nothing more, and the world seemed to shift on a tilt I couldn't put into words. The contact was small, tentative, but it carried everything she couldn't say: longing, hesitation, and a fragile hope. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't need to. That single, fleeting touch left me breathless, and I knew nothing between us would ever feel ordinary again. I remember the quiet the morning after our last night together, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for permission. The garage smelled faintly of oil, sunlight slanting through the half-open doors, dust motes floating lazily in the air. I sat on the edge of a workbench, remembering how close she had leaned, how her hand had brushed mine just enough to make everything else fade. It wasn't about the heat of the moment, or the thrill of breaking a rule, or even the spark that had drawn us together. It was about being seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't demand anything from me, yet touched the parts of me I'd spent years hiding. I realized I'd been waiting for that, without knowing it, for a long time. And her? I think she found something she didn't expect either. A space where vulnerability didn't feel like surrender. A place where her past heartbreak could exist alongside possibility, not as a shadow, but as a reminder that even cautious hearts can still take small leaps. We didn't need fireworks or grand declarations. Most days, it was subtle. The way she smiled when I brought her coffee, the quiet way we shared a glance over the counter, the unspoken understanding that some moments, once felt, linger forever. I learned to listen more, to the pauses, the silences, the words she left unsaid. I learned that restraint doesn't always mean missing out. Sometimes it means savoring the tension, letting it shape you into someone willing to notice the small things. She learned, maybe, that connection isn't a single act of bravery, but a series of tiny choices. Choosing to show up, choosing to speak when it matters, choosing to let someone in, even if just a little. Love, I realized, isn't always sweeping or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, almost imperceptible, the soft friction of two lives brushing against each other just enough to leave an imprint. And sometimes, the imprint is enough. Looking back now, I smile at how fragile it all felt at the start, how unsure we were, how tangled in hesitation. And yet, that uncertainty carried us forward. It taught me patience. It taught me that noticing someone, truly noticing them, can change everything. I don't know where we go from here, Maybe that's the point. What matters is the way things shifted, the way we were no longer pretending, no longer holding back, even in the smallest gestures. And in that, there was a warmth, quiet but unshakable, that I carry with me every day. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?